Hello, hello. I want to thank everyone for making it out today and for my actors who are here today, who are going to be performing some text for us. So this idea of Shakespeare being a feminist, I know it kind of gives one pause, because notoriously during Shakespeare's day in Elizabethan England, things were anything but awoke. And if one were to look at one of his first plays, Taming of the Shrew, and the relationship that Katrina has with Baptista, her father, who basically treats her as nothing more than an object that he needs to get rid of, and the relationship that Katrina has with her husband, who she's forced to marry, Petruchio, it's anything but, one would think, a happy marriage, as he refers to her as, "She is my chattel and she is my goods." Then if you look at arguably one of his last plays, The Tempest, once again we are seeing a father-daughter relationship, which is completely different of Miranda and Petruchio, Prospero, to what is with Katrina and her father. Now this is an idea that's kind of been percolating in my head since I was about 17, when in a semester high school English class, I had to read those plays along with some of his other ones. And I was really gobsmacked by the fact that it was the same playwright who wrote both of these plays, and how different these women were. Which led me to believe that maybe, as I've gotten older and as I've performed a great many of his plays and read them, maybe our friend Billy Shakes secretly was a late-blooming feminist. And maybe that was based on his relationships with his mother, with the published poetress Emilia Bassano, which we're going to be looking at in a little while, and also at the relationship that he had with his eldest child, his daughter Susanna. So this is the journey that we should take. All right, so what was it like to be a lady in Shakespeare's day? Well, 20 years before Shakespeare was born, England survived, and I do mean the word survived, the reign of King Henry VIII, who was anything but an awoke man, even in his own standards at his time. He had had 6 wives, 2 of which he divorced after he publicly shamed them, one being Catherine of Aragon, basically saying that she was a slut and that God was punishing her, that's why they could not have a male child, and also his wife Anne of Cleves, who he deemed too ugly to stay married to. He then beheaded 2 of his wives, Catherine Howard and Anne Boleyn. One of his wives finally gave him that son, but in the process of giving Henry the son, she also died pretty much after childbirth. And Catherine Parr, luckily for her own sake, did survive him. Now, yes, during Shakespeare's time, there were some female monarchs. We had Lady Jane Grey. She only was a monarch for 9 days, and she was then beheaded afterwards. We also had Mary I, also known as Bloody Mary, and of course, Queen Elizabeth I. Now yes, she was a monarch during a large part of his time, but we cannot forget the fact that there was constantly coups and power struggles from males who were trying to take her crown from her. As a matter of fact, she survived 9 assassination attempts, one of which being from Shakespeare's own cousin. It was still a matter to discuss in different Christian organizations at the time, and because of Henry VIII, we had Protestantism and we had Catholicism and a whole mishmash of other religious institutions as to whether women even had a soul or not. Now, the people that did agree that a female did have a soul, it was a bit of a catch-22 in the fact that, yes, a woman does possess a soul, but that is given to her by her father and her husband. Now, if a woman were to become a widow, she was only to keep 1/3 of her husband's goods. And if she were to remarry, then those goods from her first husband went to her second husband. The different organizations and institutions, which included that of the church, of the government, of the education system, the law, any money-wielding organizations, all of that was in the bylaws to make sure that women had no rights. So basically, ladies, it sucked. Now, in Shakespeare's time, men would shine in war and in honor. And for the most part, how they received more honor was in how many people they killed in war. The two times in a woman's life where she really shined was in childbirth, not surprising, especially if she would give birth to the so coveted male son, and in the art of death and lamentations. Now, the art of death and lamentations is, when we're talking about lamentations, it's a bit of a misnomer. Tending to the dead included being there when somebody was dying, either on the battlefield or of old age. Now, yes, even in Shakespeare's early plays, which I like to call his bromances, where it's all about men going on about how much they care about their fellow soldier and how much they care about their fellow guy, and we're best friends, and women, well, you know, women are just broads. I mean, that's kind of the 21st century translation of what a lot of his plays were. If you look at Henry V, before the night Falstaff dies, as he is on his deathbed. And Falstaff was a character that Shakespeare liked to write a lot about. He included Falstaff in 3 of his plays. And throughout his plays, especially if you look at Henry IV, the characters of Nym and Pistol go on about how they're such great friends and how they do anything for each other. The young Prince Hal, before he becomes king, feels the same way. As the great knight is lying on his deathbed, none of his friends are there. It is Mistress Quickly, who is the brothel owner, who is the madam, who is the one that's there for him. She is the one who tends to him. She is the one that cleans him. She is the one who is holding his hands as he is dying, when all of his others can't be there. Now, going on to the act of Lamentations, which we're going to be talking about throughout this lecture. Lamentations is the art of, first of all, singing to the dead, so that the person that is dying will slowly transition, their soul will transition from this living body onto the next world. The songs that these women sing are only sung during this time. Now, if you guys are curious, yes, there still is some recordings, obviously not of Shakespeare's day, but of pieces of this very sacred music. You guys can look up Rosa Mystica, which is on YouTube. And also a little preview, when I do my next lecture in the spring, I will be talking about women and women's sacred voices, and I will be talking about the Rosa Mystica. More importantly, though, in the act of lamentation, after one would pass, it was women who would cry and have this cathartic moment by tearing their hair out and scratching their cheeks and ripping their clothes. They were enacting the pain and the sorrow of losing somebody, not just for themselves, but for the entire community. And also, more importantly, because men were really not allowed to cry because it was considered to be not masculine, they were having that cathartic moment for the men. And of course, last but not least, if the person who was dying had been murdered, then women would take it upon themselves to curse the murderer, which is once again something that only women can do. So that is the art of the dead. So, in looking at Shakespeare's ladies, the majority of the plays only have about 2 to 4 female roles. The ratio of male characters to female characters in his entire canon is over 1,000 males to about 160 females. During Shakespeare's day, female roles were played by men. It has only really been within the last 350 years that we are seeing women be able to act. let alone having women direct or be modern day playwrights. Now, even if you were to look at America today in Hollywood and New York, it's not exactly the best ratio of female directors or of screenwriters or playwrights to men. Power was not a neutral subject for Shakespeare's women. They were constantly looking to acquire it. I'm sorry, I'm away from there we go. They were constantly looking to acquire it, avoid its most violence, circumvent it, and acquiesce to it. So throughout looking at Shakespeare and looking at his plays and his relationship with women, I basically put it into 5 acts, almost like 5 acts of a Shakespearean play. So Act 1, which I lovingly like to refer to as his bromances, is pretty much every time the hero has to deal with a female, the obstacle that is put in front of him is either A, the female is very ferocious and overbearing and assertive, or is an idealized virgin. Act 2, the hero falls deeply in love and sees his partner as his equal, and they share the same status. Act 3, the women rebel against society's institutional structures. Depending on what the women wear will depend on if they live or die. Act 4, women take power and become as ruthless as men. And Act 5, women come to the rescue and redeem the men in their life, either their husbands or their fathers. So what do we know about Shakespeare the man? Well, it's believed that he was born April 25th, 1564. Now, we don't have his exact birth date because in Elizabethan times they did not create birth certificates as we know it, but they did have baptismal records, and this is a replica of the baptismal record of where Shakespeare was baptized. And we do know that he was baptized April 26, 1564, so we're guesstimating he was born a few days before. He was born to Mary Arden, yes, Arden, like the forest in As You Like It, and John Shakespeare. He was the 4th of 8 children. Most of his siblings did not make it to adulthood. He did have a brother named Edwin, who was an actor who did perform within his company. And I'll go ahead and pass around the baptismal record. At the age of 18, he married Anne Hathaway, who was 10 years older than he was. Their first child was Susanna, and for all intents and purposes, Susanna was the apple of his eye, and as we will look at his later plays, I think Susanna had a very strong influence in his writing of females. Susanna was born 6 months after his marriage, so I think we all know what Miss Hathaway and Mr. Shakespeare were getting up to before they got to the altar. Susanna was then followed by his twins, Hamnet and Judith. Hamnet was Shakespeare's one and only son. In 1590, at 26 years old, Shakespeare leaves Stratford to move on to London to first work as an actor in a variety of different companies. His first play that was produced, or we believe that was produced, was Henry VI, Part 1. I'm one who comes from the theory that that was probably his first play. I deeply love Shakespeare and have an incredible amount of respect to him, but you can kind of tell that was his first play. Going on, and for the next 20 some odd years, he writes over 37 plays, produces, directs, and of course acts. In 1611, he retires with his wife and 2 daughters and his grandchildren. And in April 25th, 1616, he dies. So let's talk about his early work, as I lovingly like to call his bromances. So Shakespeare, as I said, he left his family and has gone to be an actor in London. Now, if we look at his early plays, and specifically we will be looking at Taming of the Shrew, Titus Andronicus, Comedy of Errors, and his early histories of Henry VI, Part 1, 2, and 3, Richard III. These plays really personify men's view of females. in the fact that when our hero is dealing with the sweet young thing, she is very virginal, she's spoken, she's very submissive. And basically, the moral of the story is that it's teaching women is, ladies, hide your true feelings and manipulate using your beauty and your modesty. Don't be a shrew, don't be too angry, or else bad things will happen to you. So we constantly see this foil relationship in his early plays. We see Catherine, or Katrina, of Taming of the Shrew, who is always very bullying to her younger sister, Bianca. And here, of course, is a picture that illustrates that. We see Adriana in Comedy of Errors, who is the shrew to her sweet, kind, dare I say somewhat ditzy sister, Luciana. Tamara in the tragedy of Titus Andronicus, Queen of the Gauls, constantly being as sadistic as she possibly can, and who she tends to focus her sadistic nature on is the beautiful, fair Lavinia, who is the daughter of her foil. Queen Margaret in Henry VI, Part 1, 2, and 3, along with Richard III, is beyond intense and ferocious, to the fact where she jumps into battle in a full suit of armor, and very sadistically, after she kills the sons of her enemies, and before she kills him, tells him to wipe his tears with their blood. So just give a bit of a preview, and let's hope that technology will be our friend. I'm going to show you a small scene of Taming of the Shrew. For those of you who are not familiar with Taming of the Shrew, it is the story of Katrina and Petruchio. Katrina, of course, being the shrew. Father will not marry his youngest daughter, Bianca, off until he can find a suitor for Katrina. Of course, because Katrina is so ferocious, or as she likes to say, my tongue will tell the anger of my heart, or else my heart conceal it will break, lets everyone knows how she feels, and is basically nobody's fool. Well, she gets married off to Petruchio, who starves her, gaslights her, keeps her from sleeping, basically tortures her until she is moved to do his bidding. And in the last time we see poor Miss Kate, this is what she has to tell us. So going on, when we think of Joan of Arc, what do we think of? Sacrifice. What else? Martyr. What else? What? France, okay. George Bernard Shaw turned her into a saint in his play St. Joan. Our good friend Billy Shakes, though, was just the opposite. What he did to her was he turned her into a devil worshiper. So when we see in this scene with Joan of Arc in Henry VI, Part 1, she is basically selling her soul to the demons so that France can win. And Miss Lisa will stand up and do some Joan. Yep.
All right.
Go on.
All right. Hello, everybody. Now help ye charming spells and parapets, and ye choice spirits that admonish me and give me signs of future accidents. You speedy helpers that are substitutes unto the lordly monarch of the north, appear and aid me in this enterprise. This speedy and quick appearance argues proof of your accustomed diligence to me. Now, ye familiar spirits that are cold out of the powerful regions under earth, help me this once, that France may get the field. Oh, hold me not with silence over long, where I was wont to feed you with my blood. I'll lop a member off and give you, in nearest of further benefit, my body shall pay recompense if you will grant my suit. Cannot my body, nor blood sacrifice, entreat you to your wonted furtherance. Then take my soul, my body, soul and all, before that England give the French the foil.
Thank you, Joan of Arc. Quite different from what we think of when we think of Joan of Arc. Moving on to sadistic women, as I said, Tamara from Titus Andronicus. If you're not familiar with the play, Tamara has her sights set on the general Titus because, first of all, he did take the land of Gaul. When he took the land of Gaul, he also killed her husband and also her firstborn son, when she threw to him and said, "Take me, take me, take me," as any mother would. So, suddenly a power shift happens, and now she is the Empress of Rome. So, she certainly has her sights on Titus and all that Titus holds dear, which is his young, virtuous daughter. So, in a situation that happens, she is alone with Lavinia, and so are her two remaining surviving sons, where she bids them to gang rape her, cut off her arms, and cut out her tongue, so that she won't ever be able to reveal who did this to her. And as she says it, she says, "As thou love me, do more harm to her." And Joanna, if you will please read us Miss Tamara. To her sons.
This vengeance on me had they executed, revenge it, as you love your mother's life, or be ye not henceforth called my children.
Very nice. And moving on to, of course, one of my favorites, Queen Margaret. Queen Margaret was French. She wasn't English. She was married to Henry VI for a lot of reasons, including the fact that her husband was such a pacifist of a ruler. She basically took the reins of the kingdom. And that helped to lead into what we now know today as the War of the Roses, which was a civil war between the Yorks and the Lancasters. And as I said earlier, when she has decimated the Yorks, and before she is going to kill York, she has just had her lover murder his son, his youngest son, about the age of 12. And this is what she says to him. "Where are your mess of boys now? The wanton Edward and the lusty George? And where's that valiant crook-back prodigy, your boy with his grumbling voice, was wont to cheer his dad in mutiny? Look, York, I stain this napkin with the blood the valiant Clifford with his rapier point made issue of the bosom of the boy. If thine eyes can water for his death, I give thee this to dry your cheeks withal." Women are not that sadistic. We really, really aren't. In a man's view, he might see them as such. But in truth, come on, ladies. Okay, we're not that sadistic. Things started to change a little bit with Richard III. Now, Richard III is a bit of an interesting play in the fact that Richard wants to become king so badly that he kills his brother and has his two nephews that are both under the age of 10 murdered as well. He also kills his wife along with the process and a bunch of other people. Now, what's interesting about Richard III, and where you're starting to see Shakespeare kind of not write his women so two-dimensionally, is the fact that it's the women that are the conscience of this play. Richard never does any of the murdering himself. He's not even in the same room. He's smart, he's shrewd. He hires people to do it. The people that kill for him are men. And not once, even at the murder of children, do they stop. They think about it and sometimes they're like, well, you know, this isn't the best thing. I think God's going to kind of be mad at us because you're not supposed to kill children. But they do. And they don't stop. They're somewhat terrified of him. It's the women, though, that stand up to him. Not through violence. Not through killing children and I'm going to throw blood on you and do these horrible things. Or by selling their soul to the devil. They do it by holding his conscience. It starts at the very, very beginning, going back to the idea of lamentation, where we see Lady Anne before she becomes his wife. And it's after the war, the Civil War and the War of the Roses, and she is walking through the streets of London with her father-in-law, Lord Lancaster, who is dead. There is really no one left in her life. Her husband has been killed in this war, obviously so has her father-in-law. And with her entourage, she's stopping at different corners and she starts to lament. And she talks about how great he is and how it is wrong that he is dead and who is on our throne now should not be there. And what is so annoying every time I tend to watch this scene is the fact that we see Lady Anne, she's very pale and she's really sad and she's all dressed in black. And it's like, lay down your honorable load. And she's talking about really sad things. What she was doing was high treason. It is high treason to go against your monarch, which is exactly what she was doing in her lament. It was almost like she was daring him. She's got nothing left to live for. She was becoming a martyr. Kill me. There's nothing left in my life. My husband is dead. The family is dead. I'm a Lancaster. I'm dirt. It was almost like, come on, kill a lady in the middle of the streets. Do it. Do it. I dare you. And that's how it starts to change. The person who stops him is Queen Elizabeth. She tricks him. She uses she uses his ego to be his foil. Oh, sure, I'll marry my daughter after you, no problem, we're good, it's okay. She tricks him. It's almost a bit, if you go back to the mothers of Plaza de Mayo during the dirty wars in Argentina. And during the dirty wars of Argentina, tyrants were coming and they were killing people. They were killing males. They were killing basically anyone who stood up to them. And they would come at night and there wouldn't be a trial. They would just be executed. And most of these families, these mothers, had no idea what happened to their children. So what they would do is they would walk the streets and they would sing songs and they would hold pictures of their loved ones. Non-violent, but they were being brave. They were being the ones to stand up to the authority and say, no more. You can kill me, but it doesn't matter. No more. Very much like Richard III and the women in Richard III. So, moving on, we get into Act 2. Luckily, no more bromances. So as we get into Act 2, we see this major change in the fact that our hero is no longer trying to possess women. He no longer sees them as an adversary, but he falls in love with who they truly are, their real characteristics, not this idealized version of what a woman should be. Females are no longer these projections. They're human beings, and they enter into a partnership. And in his writing, you're starting to see women have so much more depth of character than what you saw in the first half. And you can see it very much even within the titles. Love's Labour's Lost was originally Love Labour's Won. And at the end of the play, it doesn't exactly end in a happy marriage. The men are going off on a quest. If they complete their quest, well, then they can get married. Women are like, don't need to get married that badly, really, I don't. Much Ado About Nothing, the characters of Benedict and Beatrice, two of my favorite characters in the canon. Even if you look at the names, Benedict meaning one who is blessed, Beatrice one who blesses. Of all of the characters in Shakespeare's canon, of all the lovers, I think those two are the ones that are going to make it. Midsummer's Night Dream, we see Oberon and Titania. They are both the kings and queens of their kingdom. She doesn't acquiesce to him. As a matter of fact, he has to sit there and prove, because he's pissed her off one too many times, they're basically headed for divorce, why he's an upstanding guy. Of course he manipulates, but you know, that's a guy. Our tragedies, especially with the tragedies, you can really see it within the titles. Romeo and Juliet, both the lovers' names are there. Troilus and Cressida, Antony and Cleopatra. It was almost as if Shakespeare kind of came to this epiphany and found himself asking, why is a war story often given as much emphasis or more emphasis than a love story? Both stories demand great courage, sacrifice, and commitment. And at the end, one heals and one disseminates. So what was the motivation? Maybe it was a lady. Maybe it was the death of his son Hamnet during this time, or maybe it was the plague. This is what's known as the plague years. And during the plague years, Shakespeare bounced around to 3 different companies because too many people were dying. And for a while, he was working under a patron who was asking him to write sonnets. So this is the time when he was writing his sonnets. Now, in the meantime, what was also happening in his private life is his son Hamnet died. And I think that truly, truly did cripple him emotionally, especially because especially because Shakespeare was not with his son when he died. And it's believed that he started a relationship with this poetress, also known as the Dark Lady, Emilia Bassano. So who was Emilia Bassano? Well, Emilia Bassano was a published poetress. She was an educated musician. As a matter of fact, her father had been a musician in the court of Henry VIII. She was of Italian and Jewish descent, and her family had owned and managed land in North Africa for generations. Now, what's interesting, what's in a name? Emilia is a character in Othello. Bassano is a character in The Merchant of Venice. Now, we did know that Shakespeare did buy a house for her in London, which says a lot. And it seemed as though Shakespeare had met his match with her, almost like they were Benedict and Beatrice. Here is some of her poetry. She was very much an early feminist. In her book of poetry, and I never took Latin, so please forgive me, Slav Dex Rexo Juram, or Hail God, King of the Jews, she defends Eve along with all the other great women of history, including Cleopatra, Deborah, and Esther. And you can see in one of her passages of, "Then let us have our liberty again, and challenge to ourselves no sovereign. You came not in this world without our pain, make that bar against your cruelty." Who is this interesting lady? Now, it's believed that Sonnet 130, which is one of his more controversial sonnets with this idea of who this dark lady is, that this is to her. And Frank, if you'd be so kind as to read Sonnet 130 for us. Thank you.
My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damask, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes, is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks? I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare.
So interesting. Who is this dark lady? What we also see change is, of course, with the death of Hamnet, this almost opening of showing his grief. This is a passage from King John with the character of Constance. Constance loses her son, young Arthur. Young Arthur in the play is about the same age as young Hamnet. Now within this scene, she goes into Lamentations. She is a mother who is desperately grieving for the loss of her young son. In the meantime, there is a cardinal there who is, of course, very patriarchal, very male. Stiff upper lip, man, stiff upper lip, come on. Gotta have good show. Hold it in, hold it in. And this is her reaction to him. This is her reaction of, no, I will embrace what this feels like and how much I am hurting. Right? Constance?
Thou art not holy to belie me so. I am not mad. This hair I tear is mine. My name is Constance. I was Geoffrey's wife. Young Arthur is my son, and he is lost. I am not mad. I would to heaven I were, for then 'tis like I should forget myself. Oh, if I could, what grief I should forget. Preach some philosophy to make me mad, and thou shalt be canonized, Cardinal, for being not mad, but sensible of grief. My reasonable parts produce reason, how I may be delivered of these woes, and teach me to kill or hang myself. If I were mad, I should forget my son, or madly think a babe of clouts were he. I am not mad. Too well I feel the different plagues of each calamity.
Very nice, thank you. It is said to be a writer is to acknowledge the secret wounds we carry inside us. My theory is that Shakespeare was still so in pain of the loss of his son. And he couldn't write that for a male character, so it was channeled through Constance. This act that Constance does in her Lamentations is deeply, deeply feminine, meaning that it's felt in the body and it's an expression of relationship, where the masculine is to ignore the body and the emotion and just go for the goal. Now, also, as we are looking at our levers, we're starting to see that it transcends just happy-go-lucky, sweet love, and dare I say it goes to a spiritual ecstasy. It's clear that there was a sexual and spiritual merging, that the women and men could only love each other to this profound depth, which is absolutely equal between the both of them. With both the lovers' names in the title, Romeo and Juliet, Troilus and Cressida, Shakespeare declares that both men and women are equal and both have souls. And out of these souls merge to a passionate bonding, out of that new world order can happen. So as we're starting to look into, our love scenes, whether it be a tragedy or whether it be a comedy, there is quite a lot of spiritual undertones to it. So for instance, with Romeo and Juliet, when they first have their kiss, they go from sins to pilgrims to then saints. When when Romeo leaves his friends after the party, talk about a bromance, and he kind of disappears, and they're like, where's Romeo, Romeo? He goes over the wall to be with his Juliet. In medieval times, the expression of he's jumped the wall meant that somebody has joined the clergy, because all monasteries were behind walls. He also constantly makes reference to her of she being the East, and of course the East is the foundation for all Abrahamic religions. Here's a quick scene from Much Ado About Nothing. And it's in which Benedict and Beatrice, who have been warring the entire play, finally admit that they love each other. Now, what I love about this scene is, first of all, going back to this idea that when people truly do love each other, they go to more of a spiritual ecstasy. It takes place in a church, but also the fact that it's Benedict, not Beatrice. It's Benedict who illustrates his love for her first, not the other way around. Also, the idea of killing the bromance. After Benedict tells her how much he loves Beatrice, he says, I bid thee do me more. Kill your best friend. Go ahead and start. Bum, bum, bum. And then, as I said, when we look at Romeo and Juliet and the first king that they have, once again, it goes to spiritual ecstasy. So Antony and Cleopatra, I think, really personifies this idea that when two lovers truly do love each other and see each other as equals, even though they will not be together in this life, much as Troilus and Cressida and also of Romeo and Juliet, they will go on to create a better life. Romeo and Juliet, they kill themselves. What ends up happening? Do you guys remember? I know, like freshman year was a while ago.
Didn't their families stop their feuding
Yes!
when they died?
Yes!
All the fighting that happened in Fair Verona, where we place our scene, ended. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Yes, it stopped. Same thing if we look to Antony and Cleopatra. Why this play is not done more, I don't know, because it's quite exquisite. What is so interesting about this play is the fact that we have never in all the canon seen somebody who is at the apex of her power as Cleopatra. She is seen as the incarnation of the goddess Isis. I don't know how much more feminine we could be with that. Who is the universal mother of love, passion, desire, procreation, and she also puts things back together. What's different is the fact she can have as many lovers as she wants. All right? And there's no problem with that. Shakespeare doesn't write her as being this harlot or this horrible person. It's just her culture. Now, it's even more interesting, and to really see this power shift, in the fact that Antony is the greatest soldier since Alexander the Great, since Achilles. He personifies everything that is Rome, and Rome is very, very patriarchal and very, very masculine. He is the war god Mars incarnated. And what happens? Does he stay in Rome? No. He leaves Rome. He leaves his Roman wives. He commits high treason in Rome by setting war on Rome. Why? For the love of his lady. Even to the fact when they are married, it says in the directions that he is supposed to be dressed as the god Dionysus. The god Dionysus, the god of cross-dressing and of wild behavior and of fertility. It truly, truly shows how different it is. And with Antony's line of, "Let Rome timber melt, and wide arch of the ragged empire fall, here is my space. Kingdoms our claim, noblest life is to do thus." And staying with his lady. At the end of, with the stage directions of Antony and Cleopatra, Cleo is supposed to, this isn't exactly the most accurate, Cleo is supposed to be up on top of the pyramid. So Mark Antony takes poison, kills himself, and the stage directions is that she is at the top of the pyramid. He climbs to her. She is the top, and he needs to climb to her, who is higher than he is, and dies in her arms, very much like the Pietà statue. As at the base, it's supposed to be both of her handmaidens, which is the tableau of the triple goddess, maiden, mother, crone. So going on, now we get into Act 3. And yes, women step out to tell their truth. However, two things happen. Okay? Women who tell their truth and dress up as men, they go on a fabulous journey. And at the end of the play, they end up getting married, usually to their true love. However, if women tell the truth and they stay in their dress, they end up being killed. So why do we have these cross-dressing women? Well, because of the storylines that happen to them. Basically, the heroine has lost a father, or has been thrown out of the house, or has been shipwrecked, or whatever the storyline may be. But she has found out that she needs to go on a solo journey because there is no man to take care of her. And in this new disguise, she is to understand every facet of herself. She makes her own identity without the aid of her father, brother, husband, uncle, whoever. And in this new disguise, in this new location, she's able to break the role society has forced her to live. It is only when the female embraces all of herself that she is able to make a true commitment to whoever her husband is at the end of the play. Now, of course, for our ladies on the other side, for poor Portia from Julius Caesar, as she says, my voice is useless, I shall burn it out. Poor Ophelia in Hamlet had nothing else to do. Her father is dead. Her brother is upset. And her and Hamlet are no more. Madness was really the only thing she could possibly do. And then, of course, kill herself. And time again, when the women in this stage are honest, they are killed. Which goes on to, I like to think Shakespeare had a bit of a dark night of the soul. Women are not about telling truth, they just want power. That's all they want. So we see that within the plays of King Lear and Macbeth and Coriolanus. Now, what is so horrendous is women do take power within these plays. But the result is horrendous because once they have power, they don't try and change society's norms to make it more matriarchal. They try and cut off their nurturing spirit by still living in a patriarchal system. It's horrendous for everyone. The country is engulfed in war, love has very little voice, and suffering abounds. It is a dark place for everyone. And these poor women have no idea what a matriarchal system would look like because they've never seen one. So as we see with Lady M, where she completely cuts off her nurturing spirit. Talk to us, Miss Joanne.
Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the top full of duress cruelty. Make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it. Come to my woman's breast and take my milk for gal.
Very good. She's cutting off what it is. She's cutting off what it is to be a female. And of course, we all know what happens in Macbeth, that we're not in a theater, so I can say it. And our last. This is when there is full self-reflection. Now, what was going on in Shakespeare's life at the time? He's getting ready to retire. He's spending more time at Stratford-upon-Avon. Susanna, as I said, his firstborn, his eldest daughter, truly was the apple of his eyes. He spent a lot of time with her and her husband, who was the best-known apothecary in the town, Dr. Hall. It's also been believed that he also taught the apothecarying and healing arts to Susanna. Susanna spent some time in jail because it's going back and forth whether she wanted to be Protestant or Catholic, because she would not go to church. It is known that when Shakespeare did die, the first best of everything went to his daughter Susanna. Second best of everything went to his wife, and third best of everything went to Judith. Judith and him were not exactly on the best of terms when he died. It's also very interesting in the fact that when Shakespeare died, he had quite a lot of intelligent, influential friends. The one person who was the executor to his will was his daughter, which was very, very different from that time because it tended to be who your best mate was. And especially with Shakespeare, he had plenty of best mates who were lawyers. But no, he trusted his daughter implicitly. What we see at the end of these plays is there is constantly males who make very poor choices based on their ego. Once again, the country falls into disarray. Who heals it? The women. Either two friends together, like in A Winter's Tale, Hermione and Paulina. Believe it or not, even in Henry VIII, where the real villain in his play is Cardinal Wolsey, and it is Queen Catherine and Anne Boleyn who team up together, no anger there, team up together to try and save Henry's soul. Okay, guys, I know, all right? It's not exactly the most historically accurate play, but it does say something about Shakespeare's thinking at that time. And probably one of his most lovely plays at the end of this time is The Tempest, in which, yes, two brothers acting very stupidly. One brother jealous of the other brother, so he usurps his crown and casts him and Miranda away. Why does he usurp his brother's crown? Because His brother wanted to learn magic. He wasn't a very good king. So 18 years go by. The brother on this island with his daughter Miranda lets her be who she is. He puts absolutely no limitations on her. Doesn't teach her about courtly love or this, that, and the other. Lets her be as she is. This wild, beautiful creature who is completely in her element living on this desert isle. And it is Miranda who at the end heals the brothers and brings them back into civilization. Completely the 180 of a father-daughter relationship of what we saw in the very beginning with Taming of the Shrew. That is my presentation. Thank you very much. And I would really like to give a big standing ovation to my actors, if you guys would please be so kind as to stand up. Thanks you guys for dedicating your time. I appreciate it.